It wasn't loud. There was no shouting. No slammed doors. No dramatic exit. Just 3 words. Spoken quietly. Like they didn't matter. I have to leave. The twins were crying. Their soft, sharp wails bouncing off the kitchen tiles. Bottles unwashed. Laundry half folded. My hair a mess. My heart worse. He stood there, perfectly pressed. Suit immaculate. Tie straight. Like he was going to a meeting. Not abandoning a family. I remember staring at his hands. How steady they were. Hands that used to hold me like I was something fragile. Hands that now gripped his phone tighter than my heart. "What do you mean, you have to leave?" My voice cracked. But not from surprise. The signs had been there. Just subtle. Poisoned sugar. Missed dinners. Quiet disapproval. His phone lighting up with her name more than mine. "You know how mother feels," he said. Like that was enough. Like her feelings had ever fed our babies at 2 a.m. Margaret Montgomery. The matriarch. The puppet master. She never needed to scream. Her weapons were polite. Elegant. "Amanda dear, you must understand, some families protect their legacy." Her legacy apparently didn't include me. Or our children. "She's giving me a choice," he said. "The company or..." His eyes flicked to the bassinet. "To me." He didn't finish the sentence. Because finishing it would have made it real. The thing about abandonment is, it rarely happens in a single moment. It builds. In missed calls. In unspoken resentments. In the slow erosion of partnership. This was just the day it showed its face. I didn't beg. I wanted to. But something heavier sat in my chest. Pride. Maybe. Or maybe exhaustion. Because when you're the one up at night, feeding, soothing, holding everything together, you stop asking for hands that don't reach back. He looked at me like he was sorry. But not enough to stay. And in that moment, I realized, his love was real. But his mother's approval was more convenient. And convenience always wins with cowards. He picked up his briefcase. The twins were still crying. He didn't flinch. Didn't turn back. Just walked out. Calm. Measured. As if leaving was a scheduled meeting on his calendar. The door clicked shut. And with it, so did the chapter of us. I stood there. Still holding a bottle. Still wearing his college hoodie. But something shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. If love has to be negotiated, it's not love. The phone buzzed. His mother's name. I didn't answer. Because I knew what the message would be. "It's for the best. You deserve someone who understands his world. Bloodlines matter, dear. But here's what mattered to me. 2 tiny heartbeats. Dependent. Innocent. Mine." That night, the house felt cavernous. Rooms echoing with absence. But amidst the stillness, there was noise. The twins. Hungry. Needing. Alive. And they didn't care about corporate legacies or maternal ultimatums. They cared about warmth. About survival. About me. I rocked them. Sang off-key lullabies. Wiped tears. Theirs and mine. And somewhere between bottle feeds and exhaustion, a vow formed. You may have left. But I will never leave them. Or myself. Because survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes, it's the quiet refusal to let someone else's choices define your worth. The next morning, I packed away the last of his things. Not in anger. In necessity. Because every empty hanger was space for my own story. He had chosen power. Money. Approval. But I was about to choose myself. And in doing so, I would build a life so solid they'd regret ever thinking I needed rescuing. He left with his name, but I kept my dignity. Because abandonment is loud, but self-respect whispers louder when the dust settles. He left. But my children's cries refused to let me fall apart. The first night alone was quiet. But not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums in your ears when there's too much space and not enough love to fill it. The twins didn't understand betrayal. They only understood hunger, discomfort, need. And need doesn't wait for heartbreak to heal. I wanted to cry. Wanted to collapse onto the kitchen floor like they do in movies. But the bottles wouldn't fill themselves. The diapers wouldn't change on cue. There's something brutally honest about motherhood. It doesn't give you time to be the victim. I fed them, one after the other. Rocked them with arms that felt like lead. Sang lullabies through cracked lips. And somewhere between their small, contented sighs and the clink of empty bottles, a thought surfaced. He left. But I'm still here. Breathing. Not surviving. Not thriving. Just breathing. And in that moment, that was enough. Days blurred into each other. Nights felt longer. Money felt shorter. My savings thinned faster than my patience. Every job application felt like shouting into a void. Single mother. No corporate references. Overqualified, for retail. Underexperienced, for design firms. But rejection stings less when you're too busy to flinch. I took small gigs. Freelance design work. Nursery layouts. Cheap website mock-ups. Clients who paid late. Clients who didn't pay at all. But each job was a brick. Stacked, unevenly, toward something sturdier. The twins became my rhythm. Feed. Change. Nap. Repeat. Their small victories, a new giggle, a steady grip on my finger, became my oxygen. Because when life shrinks to 4 walls and 2 tiny humans, you learn to breathe differently. One afternoon, Tessa stopped by. Unannounced. Unapologetic. She brought soup. And silence. The good kind. The kind that fills space without needing to be earned. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, she said, watching me juggle bottles and invoices. But she was wrong. I did. Not to Daniel. Not to his mother. To myself. Because self-worth isn't given. It's built. Stitched together from every moment you refuse to give up. That night, the twins fell asleep in my arms. One on each side. For a brief, fragile moment, the world was still. No bills. No echoes of slammed doors. No mother-in-law puppeteering from a distance. Just us. And that was enough. As I watched them breathe, their tiny chests rising and falling, I realized something. They weren't born into a broken home. They were born into a rebuilding one. And brick by brick, we'd get there. The next morning, I made a decision. No more waiting for opportunities to knock. I'd build the door myself. Their clothes were always an afterthought. Hand-me-downs. Ill-fitting. Impersonal. So I took out my old sewing machine. The one gathering dust in the closet. Threaded the needle with shaky hands and stitched them clothes not from necessity, but from love. They weren't perfect. But they were ours. I posted a picture online. Just a small post. No hashtags. No grand announcements. Made these for my twins. Keeps my hands busy. Keeps my heart full. To my surprise, comments came. Requests. Encouragement. A spark. Small. But real. And that was the moment Little Blessings was born. Not as a business. Not as revenge. As a lifeline. For me. For them. Every order felt like proof. Proof that I wasn't invisible. That I wasn't defined by who left. Or why. I was still breathing. Still building. One stitch at a time. As days turned into weeks, the apartment transformed. From a space of absence to a space of creation. Fabric scraps on the couch. Sketches taped to the fridge. Giggles bouncing off walls that once echoed. With his retreating footsteps, Tessa became my unofficial assistant. Answering emails. Packaging orders. Not because she pitied me. Because she believed in me even when I didn't. The bank account grew slowly. Not enough for luxuries. but enough to breathe without gasping. And in every package shipped, I sent a piece of myself, not the woman he abandoned, the woman he underestimated. As the twins napped one afternoon, I stood by the window. The same window I once stared out of as he walked away. But now it framed a different view. Not of loss, but of quiet victories. He left, but he took nothing that I couldn't rebuild. Abandonment doesn't define your ending. Sometimes, it defines where you begin. Because breathing isn't just survival, it's the quiet rebellion of choosing to keep going. They thought I'd fall apart. Instead, I stitched a new life from the scraps they left behind. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't viral. It was slow, methodical, needle, thread, repeat. In between feeding bottles and wiping sticky fingers, I stitched. Not just fabric, but dignity, sanity, hope. The first few orders trickled in. Friends of friends. Mothers who'd seen my post and wanted something handmade, not factory churned. Each package was packed with trembling hands. Because when your life has been defined by what you lost, even small wins feel fragile. Like they could vanish. But they didn't. They multiplied. Slowly. Quietly. The nursery became a workshop. Bolts of fabric stacked in the corner. Thread spools lined up on the windowsill. The hum of the sewing machine became the heartbeat of my new life. At night, after the twins were asleep, I sketched. Not just clothes. Dreams. Designs that spoke of comfort, of innocence untouched by legacy expectations. Rompers with hand-stitched names. Blankets that whispered "you're loved" in every thread. Tessa would drop by with coffee. She never asked how I was. She knew. Instead, she'd roll up her sleeves. Help package orders. Organize fabric. Sometimes we'd sit in silence. A different kind of silence than before. Not the suffocating absence of him, but the soft presence of someone choosing to stay. Of course, there were failures. Orders cancelled. Packages returned. One client left a scathing review. Too homemade. Not professional enough. It stung. Because when you pour yourself into every stitch, criticism feels personal. But then, another order came. Then another. Proof that for every voice trying to shrink you, there are others waiting for your truth. One evening, as I sewed tiny buttons onto a baby dress, the twins crawled toward me. Their giggles filled the room. And I realized, this wasn't survival work anymore. This was legacy work. Theirs. Mine. A life not built from someone else's approval, but from my own hands. I named the brand Little Blessings. Not because it was catchy, but because that's what my twins were. Blessings. Not burdens. Not mistakes. Not inconveniences. Proof that love can grow even in the harshest soil. Orders increased. I learned to price my work not from desperation, but from worth. Learned to say no to underpaid requests. Learned that boundaries are stitched the same way as dresses. Carefully. Deliberately. Social media wasn't my strong suit. But stories were. So I shared them. Small posts about motherhood. About starting over. About making something from nothing. And people responded. Not to perfection. To honesty. Every comment felt like a thread pulling me back into the world. Not as his abandoned wife. Not as the poor single mother. As Amanda. Creator. Businesswoman. Mother. One afternoon, a blogger reached out. She wanted to feature Little Blessings. I almost said no. The fear of being seen, of being judged again, was louder than I expected. But then I thought of my daughters. What would I teach them if I kept hiding? So I said yes. The article went live. Simple. Humble. But the ripple was immediate. Orders doubled. Emails flooded in. People resonated not with the stitches, but with the story behind them. Because everyone roots for the woman who refuses to stay down. Tessa and I celebrated with cheap wine and pizza on the floor. The twins babbled happily, oblivious to the shift happening around them. But I felt it. The quiet power of reclaiming your own narrative. He hadn't called. Hadn't shown up. And for once, I wasn't checking my phone for his name. Because my worth was no longer measured by his absence or his approval. Each package I sent was more than fabric. It was a stitched declaration. I am still here. Building. Breathing. Becoming. By the end of that month, I hired my first part-time helper. Not much. Just a few hours a week. But it was a start. Proof that what began in survival had become a business. A life. Mine. They expected me to unravel. But stitch by stitch, I built a life they couldn't pull apart. Because resilience is sown in quiet defiance. I never craved the spotlight. But when it found me, I was ready. It happened on a Tuesday. The twins had just discovered their new favorite game, pulling every folded fabric from my shelves and giggling like it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't stop them. Because messes can be cleaned. But moments like that, they're stitched into your bones. While folding back their chaos, my phone buzzed. A message from Tessa. You're going to want to see this. Attached was a link. I clicked. A popular mom influencer, the kind with millions of followers, perfectly curated feeds, the life I never imagined for myself, had posted a photo. A baby wearing one of my handmade rompers. My romper. Tagged. Credited. Her caption was simple. When small businesses stitch love into every thread, you feel it. My brand name was there. In front of thousands. Maybe millions. My hands trembled. Not from fear. From disbelief. Within minutes, my notifications exploded. Orders. Messages. Shares. A tidal wave of attention. Not for a scandal. Not for a sob story. For my work. My craft. For something I built when I thought I had nothing. The twins, oblivious to my small world-shattering moment, crawled onto my lap. And I laughed. A deep, chest-rattling laugh. Because for once, life was giving back without taking first. The influx was overwhelming. Emails poured in. Collaboration offers. Stock inquiries. Wholesale deals. It felt like standing under a waterfall, unprepared but exhilarated. Tessa showed up within the hour. No questions. Just sleeves rolled up. What do we tackle first, boss lady? We reorganized. Prioritized. Scaled. Every task was a lesson in managing success born from struggle. By evening, Little Blessings had tripled its following. Sales metrics I didn't even understand were climbing. But amidst the numbers, what hit me hardest were the messages. From mothers. From women who felt unseen. From people who said my story mirrored their quiet battles. One message stood out. I watched my husband walk out when I was 6 months pregnant. Seeing your journey feels like seeing my own reflection. Thank you for not hiding. I read it twice. Because that's what this was about. Not revenge. Not proving him wrong. Proving to myself that I was never broken. Just underestimated. The next day, a local magazine reached out. They wanted to feature Little Blessings. Not just the products. The story. My story. I hesitated. Because telling your story means owning your scars. But then I looked at the twins. Peacefully asleep. Wearing the clothes I made. And I realized, if I didn't own my narrative, someone else would. So I said yes. The interview was simple. In a small studio. No grand lights. No stylists. Just me. My work. My truth. I spoke about beginnings. About loss. About rebuilding with hands that once trembled with fear but now stitched with certainty. The interviewer asked gently, "What would you say to the woman you were the day he left?" I smiled. "Thank you for staying standing. Because sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do." The article went live. The response was overwhelming. Not viral in the influencer sense. But deeply human. The kind of impact that algorithms can't predict but audiences crave. Within days, a national retail chain reached out. They wanted to stock my line. My designs. The brand born from tears and midnight sewing sessions. The offer wasn't life-changing in a lottery ticket way, but it was life-affirming. Because it was earned. Every stitch. Every sleepless night. Every moment of refusal to give up had led here. I sat with the twins on the floor, held their tiny hands, and whispered, "We're building a life they said we couldn't. And the best part? We did it without needing the people who left." Tessa raised a toast that evening. Plastic cups. Cheap sparkling water. To being noticed. But more importantly, to knowing you were worthy long before they saw it. I smiled. Because visibility is nice. But knowing your worth in the dark? That's power. They tried to erase me. But sometimes, the world finds your light when you stop hiding it yourself. This wasn't luck. It was persistence finally seen. He traded his family for power. But when he saw me thriving, he realized what power couldn't buy. The day the interview aired, I didn't tell anyone. No watch party. No announcements. Because I had nothing to prove. Not anymore. But the universe has a way of putting mirrors in front of those who avoid reflection. And that's exactly what happened to Daniel. He was in his office. Polished glass. Cold marble. A corner suite that screamed success. The TV played in the background. A lifestyle segment. And then, there I was. The host introduced me, founder of Little Blessings, a small business making waves nationwide. A story of resilience, motherhood, and rebuilding from abandonment. My face filled the screen. But it wasn't the face he left behind. This woman was composed. Centered. Not defined by who wasn't beside her. He froze. His assistant noticed. Quietly excused herself. Because even strangers can sense when a man is confronted by his own cowardice. As the interview played, I spoke of the twins. Of building a brand out of necessity. Of finding purpose when love is withdrawn. No names mentioned. But he knew. Oh, he knew. Each word was a mirror. Reflecting not just my growth, but his retreat. At one point, the host asked, "What kept you going when everything seemed lost?" I smiled. Genuine. Unapologetic. Knowing that my daughters deserved a mother who didn't quit on herself, those words hit him harder than any accusation. Because guilt doesn't need to be named to be felt. He turned off the TV. But it was too late. The image of me, standing tall in my truth, was already stitched into his mind. That evening, he stood outside my apartment. No fanfare. No calls ahead. He just showed up. Like he had a right to. I opened the door. No surprise. No anger. Just calm. Because by the time they regret leaving, you've already built a life where their return isn't necessary. He looked thinner. Tired. The weight of choices sits heavy when you finally stop pretending they were the right ones. "I saw you on TV," he said. I nodded. Waited. Because silence is sometimes the loudest invitation for truth. "You look strong." I smiled. Not out of spite. But out of peace. "Because I am." He shifted. "I came to say I'm sorry." I believed him. Not because he deserved forgiveness. But because regret has a tone you can't fake. But I wasn't here to console him. This wasn't his redemption arc, this was my closure. "I'm glad you regret it," I said. "But you're not the center of my story anymore." His eyes glistened. "But tears don't rewrite history." He looked down. "Mother always said legacy is what you leave behind." He met my gaze. "But watching you, I realized legacy is also what you build when no one hands it to you." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said. But honesty doesn't grant entry into a life you chose to leave. This wasn't about revenge, Daniel. I kept my voice steady. It was about remembering I was never small. "Even when you made me feel that way," he nodded. "Because the worst punishment for people like him is seeing you thrive without needing them." He asked to see the twins. I didn't say no. But I didn't say yes. That conversation is a different bridge. One you'll have to build on their terms. Boundaries. Firm. Clear. Earned. Not granted. He left quietly. The same way he had months ago. But this time, it wasn't him walking away from me. It was me standing in a place where his approval held no currency. As the door closed, I felt no triumph. Just relief. Because closure isn't loud. It's quiet. Soft. The exhale after holding your breath for far too long. That night, I held the twins close. Not out of fear. But gratitude. Because they deserved a mother who chose growth over bitterness. And so did I. He sought closure. But I had already given it to myself. Because real power isn't being missed. It's not missing who left you behind. He wanted forgiveness. But I had already forgiven myself. After he left, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because a weight had been lifted, but because I'd stopped carrying it. He had come for closure. But closure isn't something you get from others. It's something you give yourself when you realize you were never the one who needed saving. The twins were teething that week. Sleepless nights. Constant fussing. Tiny, sharp screams that pierced the quiet. But even through the exhaustion, I found a strange kind of peace. Because these were the hard moments I used to think I couldn't survive alone. And yet, here I was. No rescue required. Little Blessings was thriving. The retail chain collaboration had launched. Orders were steady. The apartment buzzed with activity. But more importantly, it buzzed with life, laughter, mess, chaos that was ours. Tessa still dropped by. Our friendship had morphed from crisis response to quiet companionship. She never asked about Daniel. Because she knew the important chapters had already been written. One afternoon, a package arrived. A small, elegant box. No note. But the handwriting was familiar. Inside, a silver bracelet. Tiny charms shaped like twins. An apology disguised as a gift. I smiled. Because gifts don't erase choices. They're just things. And the life I'd built was no longer up for purchase. I placed the bracelet in a drawer. Not out of spite. Out of indifference. Because forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about making peace with the person you became because of it. The twins took their first steps days later. No audience. No grand applause. Just small, wobbly steps from couch to table. And in that simple moment, I felt more fulfilled than any validation he could have given me. Because milestones are sweeter when you know you reached them on your own terms. As their birthday approached, I planned a small gathering. Not for social media. Not for optics. For us. For the people who stayed. Who showed up when it wasn't convenient. Tessa. Neighbors. Customers who became friends. A village we built from scratch. Daniel wasn't invited. Not out of anger. Out of boundaries. Because not everyone deserves a front row seat to your healing. On their birthday, as we lit the candles, I watched my daughters giggle, clap, smear cake on their faces. And I realized, they would grow up knowing love that didn't come with conditions. After the party, as the apartment quieted down, I stood by the window. The same window where I once watched him leave. But this time, the view was different. No longer a portrait of abandonment. But a reflection of resilience. The phone buzzed. A simple text. Thank you for teaching me what real legacy means. From Daniel. No expectations. No hidden agenda. Just words. And for once, they didn't sting. I replied. Not with bitterness. Not with an invitation. Just this. I didn't teach you. Life did. Because growth isn't about proving yourself to those who left. It's about not needing them to validate your worth. That night, as I tucked the twins into bed, I whispered, "We are enough," 3 simple words. The opposite of his. The words that rebuilt what he tried to leave in ruins. Because this was never a story about being left. It was a story about choosing to stay. With myself, for myself, and in the end, no rescue was required. He thought walking away would define me. But I built a life where his absence wasn't a wound. It was space. Space to grow. Space to breathe. Space to thrive. Because the only person who could save me was already here.